Here we go.
Outrageous!
Hello, my name is John, and I plan to be your one-stop shop for action movie reviews and rankings, as well as comic book movies, comic book TV. And so if any of that interests you, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. And today, we are continuing along my James Bond journey, where I watched through all of the main Eon James Bond films, most for the first time, and share my thoughts. And today, we are moving on to 1971's Diamonds Are Forever, directed by Guy Hamilton, starring Sean Connery. This is Sean Connery's last appearance and last performance as James Bond, at least within the main Eon line of films. And just a little backstory. Prior to starting this series, I was under the impression that this was one of the best, most well-regarded movies in the franchise. But then, after starting the series, I started seeing that this is not one of the best, well-regarded, at least. A lot of people think it's one of the worst, and I knew that before even watching it, but it was just kind of a weird thing. Like, prior to it, all I really knew about it was the song, and the song is spectacular. And so I just kind of assumed that the movie was as well, but as I've seen it, I can understand why people have it towards the bottom of their lists and regard it as one of the worst Bond films. Although in my opinion, I enjoyed it a little more than another Sean Connery film that I watched, but it's still not necessarily the greatest. So I guess let's just get started by talking about the action. This is probably one of the better aspects of this film because it goes full cheese with the action. And I thought most of them were very entertaining with all of that cheesiness, especially the car chase scene in Las Vegas. I loved how they did the maze, not maze. They did kind of this thing with a parking lot. I called it a parking lot maze in my notes, but I mean, it wasn't really a maze, but I love the way that played out, as well as when he goes up on the two wheels. I just thought that was some fun, cheesy action. And then, although they're not all great, the opening scene was pretty jarring. It felt chopped and odd, and there's some odd moments involving like choking a girl or something that was weird. But one action scene that I did not like was when he was on the moon in this moon rover driving around the desert. I don't get what they were thinking with that. It was just it just seemed stupid, and it felt like the vehicles, all of them, were moving slow, and it felt like the stunt drivers were playing it safe, kind of, and it just wasn't exciting at all. And that whole space buggy moon rover sequence I just thought it was terrible. And then the acting, moving on to the acting, I guess, and the characters. I don't think this is Sean Connery. He does seem like he's having a lot of fun with this role. He does seem quite a bit older than his last appearance. There was a few years past because he wasn't in on Her Majesty's Secret Service. And so there was a few years that passed, but he seemed a lot older than he actually was. He actually looked closer in age to Never Say Never Again Bond than he does in You Only Live Twice Bond, but I don't necessarily think it was his best Bond. And then Charles Gray, I think, was the best. Charles Gray as Blofeld, I think, was the best actor in this movie. I did enjoy him. I think he was probably worse than the two previous Blofelds, but I do think he was the best in this movie, which honestly isn't saying a whole lot. I'm just being honest. But the acting was just a big weak spot in this movie, and the characters as well. Big weak spot. Tiffany Case, honestly, until the third act, she was probably one of the better performances. But the character just felt too helpless at times. I didn't like it. And then there's another girl character, but she's only in one scene, but she annoyed the living hell out of me. And that was Plenty O'Toole. I just can't get over the fact how annoying I thought she was, but it was only one scene. But then Mr. Kid, Mr. Wint, I thought they were terrible and annoying and honestly a little pointless. But the absolute biggest problem with the characters and acting was Willard White. So I thought when they originally introduced him, before you knew, spoiler alert, that Blofeld was impersonating him, I thought it was a terrible accent thing, that they were doing American accent, Southern accent thing. But then it turned out to just be Blofeld pretending to do it, and I thought that was fine. But I actually thought that was a better accent than the actual Willard White's accent. I just thought, I apologize if that's the actor's real voice, but I highly doubt it. And it was just annoying. Every time he opened his mouth, I wanted to throw something at my television. I just thought it was so annoying. And he bugged the living crap out of me. Characters and the acting in this movie were terrible. But, like I said, there's other things about it that really did that I really did enjoy. But moving on to the visuals, the production design I still think is pretty good, as most of these movies are. And the cinematography is good, and I think the back half of the movie especially has a pretty good camera work. But one aspect of the visuals that is not very good is the fact of it has a lot of special effects that have not dated very well. They're not even that great with their time period, but they just haven't aged very well. That being said, it does somewhat give it a nice cheesy B-movie feel that can be enjoyable. And so I guess it's not too much of a negative on that standpoint. And then on to the story and the writing. I do think the story itself is pretty decent, and the pacing I thought is pretty good. But I think the movie faults, I don't think the dialogue is as good as the previous movie, at least as good as On Her Majesty's Secret Service and a couple of the others. I thought it was a little too cheesy at times, but it didn't entirely hold it back. It had some fun elements to it, but I do think it was a little overboard on the cheese with the dialogue. And the dialogue did kind of... Cheesiness works when you have good characters, but this movie, as I said, kind of had more annoying characters than good characters, and so the cheesy dialogue doesn't always work when you have characters like that. And so I guess let's move on to the sound. Shirley Bassey's song is amazing. I love it. I was first introduced to it through a Kanye West song, but I love this song, and but I do think the score overall is probably the worst one out of any of these. There's some weird electronic organ, I don't know entirely the instrument thing based off of the sound thing that they do with the Bond theme, just not utilized very well. And then back to that moon rover sequence. They had like this cartoonish sound going on in the background within the score during that sequence, and it just added to the unlikability of that whole moon rover sequence, making it feel even worse than it actually was. And so I guess let's just move on to the rating. Diamonds Are Forever is a poorly acted movie, and it hasn't aged particularly well, but I do think there's a ton of cheesy, fun, enjoyable action in this film. And even though this review has been very, very negative, I do think the fun, action, cheesy aspects of it that are enjoyable kind of balance out the bad characters, if you will, because most of the bad characters kind of seem to die for the most part anyway. And so I do think it does kind of have this good balance between being a terrible movie and just having some fun almost B-movie feeling, fun, cheesy action. And so I think because of that, I think a fair score for Diamonds Are Forever would be a right down the middle score of a 2.5. Thanks for watching my video. If you've seen Diamonds Are Forever, if you think it's the worst Bond film, or even if you think it's the best Bond film, from any perspective, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you like this video, if you liked me, go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. And maybe click the subscribe button as well, as I plan to be a one-stop shop for action movie reviews and rankings, as well as comic book movies, comic book television. So if anything of that interests you, click the subscribe button. And also click it if you want to continue along my James Bond journey as I start the Roger Moore era. And just as always, have a great day.